Hey guys, it's Adari Bros here. Recently I was asked to do a video on my Dreyfuss Hudson. This is a Broadway limited imports model produced around 2 years ago. They've done 2 runs. One was like 2009, one was like 2014, 13. These are still available. You can still get these from many dealers. They're very nice models. This one has been modified slightly, and I'll go over that in a couple minutes. But for now, I want to go over the basic things. History of this engine. In 1938, these were built, or rather streamlined. Actually, no, they were built for the New York Central Railroad. They were streamlined with the Dreyfuss Design. Henry Dreyfuss designed this. In 1940, the paint scheme was changed to a simplified scheme. And along the way, some of the skirting was cut back, and the front right here was also cut so the generators could be accessed easier, and the air compressors rather. Before that, it had a longer skirt and it was all covered. I personally like the original better. However, this does accurately represent 54, 53 as it did appear around 1940-ish and a couple of years after that. Later on in life, it was much more heavily modified with slightly different rods as well as different tender in many cases. But for now, let me go over the sounds and start looking at the details that Broadway Limited incorporated to this model. So the first things first, let's start her up. So the first thing, of course, we have a headlight. It has a smoke unit, which I'm trying to start up now. Hopefully it will work. It has plenty of beautiful sounds, including a beautiful whistle, which we'll hear shortly, and a very nice bell. Let's take her for a spin. Detail-wise, this thing is very good for the price point. However, sound-wise, there's a couple issues. One of my least favorite things about Paragon 2, many of the Paragon 2 decoders do this, is that when you blow the whistle while the bell is on, the bell sound changes. The reason for this is because the Paragon 2 decoder, I believe, is an 8-bit decoder. If it is a 16-bit decoder, it has some issues being a 16-bit decoder. But let's listen to it here. So I'm going to play the bell. Starts up gradually, which I think is very nice. Then, but listen to the whistle here. Listen to the bell. It's a different sound entirely. I personally really do not like that. It's one of my least favorite things. Now, a grade crossing whistle. I believe this does have one. We have to blow the whistle fast, so here we go. That's Broadway Limited's attempt at a grade crossing whistle. Not my favorite. Has a little quill to it. It's nice. It could be better. Now, detail-wise, this model is pretty spot on, as previously stated. The wheels are the famous Scullin disc drivers that the New York Central almost exclusively had. The cylinders are capped in nickel. Nickel silver, I would guess, is how they did it. The rods are shiny, as the real ones were. And the detail that would be behind the skirt, like the cylinder, the air tank there, is very well done. The walkways are treaded where appropriate. The famed New York Central tender is correct, and the dimensions are correct from what I can tell and what I remember from unboxing this a while back. This locomotive features an Alesco feed water heater under which just pops out there barely. One thing to note about the New York Central, because of the low tunnels that they had, many of their engines were very low, which I think is very cool looking. Now, to get into the modifications to this engine that I've made, as I stated previously, one of the modifications I made was painting these front wheels, not black in this case, but more a dark gray. Reason for that is, in real life they were painted dark gray. Now I'm sure they turned black or even rust colored very quickly, however I like the dark gray. The silver disc drivers are a correct shade of silver. Another modification I made is that I paint detailed some of the valves with red, such as the 2 valves on the pop valves, and also the 4 at the front on the other side, which I'll show you in a couple minutes. Another modification I had to make was I drilled an extra hole in the drawbar because the 2 factory holes are way too far apart. In fact, on the closest hole from the factory, the tender deck does not touch. The deck plate does not touch, and I'm not a fan of that. This locomotive does not feature a cab light, as do many of the brass hybrid engines that Broadway Limited makes. But again, overall, this is a really nice engine. I'm going to show you a couple more details, particularly on the tender. The detail on the conductor's side of the fireman's side of the engine is just as good. Again, I did some detail painting on the valves here, and that just helps the appearance. And another thing to note is the interior of the cab is fully detailed. From this angle you can just barely see some of the valves behind that front window, and those are factory painted properly and very nicely. And I'll show you a better view of that in a second here. Maybe I'll even just stitch a photo in. Now if we just bring the engine forward a little bit here, we can see the awesome detail at the end of the tender, which is one of my favorite places actually. So if you notice here, it's really cool. We have the danger keep off signs, and they are totally legible. It's really cool because you can actually see the bracing that holds the streamlined shroud on right here, if you can see that, right there and there. You have a ladder, you have the danger signs, you have a close plate, a buffer plate, which helped smooth out the ride for passengers. You have a rear light, of course, and the light is bright, and it's a very, very well done engine. I really enjoy this model. It's a fantastic model. I'm going to show you guys a couple other things and wrap this up. A couple other things to note: the hatches on the top of the roof do not open. Here are the check valves. They look really good. There's the red paint there that helps highlight everything. And if you haven't seen my video on detail painting, please go check it out. It's on my channel. The link will be in the description. Right back here on the tender, we can also see the high level of detail even under the shrouding. I believe that's a train control box or just a toolbox, one or the other. And there's a lot of just cool details on this. So what I'm going to do now, just run this thing back and forth a couple times, show you guys everything, hopefully show off all the sounds this thing has to offer. Hopefully you guys like this video, and hopefully the guy that requested this enjoys it as much as I did making it. Thanks guys for watching, and please enjoy the next minute or so of the Dreyfuss Hudson running. One other real quick thing to note is that this engine does have traction tires, so it can pull quite a bit. Now let's see it run. Another cool feature of the Broadway Limited Paragon 2 is the station announcements, which I will play for you now. Then once it's running for about 15 seconds, you get other sounds. So I'm going to try to go slow here and get about 15 seconds.
Time for the last leg. We can make up that lost time for the last leg. Four is good.